A Mighty Wind, The Annals of History, by Lord Blackwater. Epilogue. Vagilla and Shortner. Vagilla floated in the void. She was granted her physical form back, but this was not how she had imagined using it again.
Oh, that's it. Just a little more to the left. Keep licking that cream off my Kansas cupcake.
Shortner moaned with pleasure. It was an unwelcomed role reversal. Vagilla felt she had been so close to obtaining the power she so badly wanted. Now she was pleasing Mrs. Shortner, the newly elected Salamander Union representative. She looked behind Shortner at the long line of salamanders waiting, all dripping with anticipation. But despite all the dripping salamander pudding, Vagilla had to smile. Barnaby had found a way to lead the Rashimi people. He had done what she couldn't do and was passing that on to the future generations of Rashimi through Trinity. In addition to that, Vagilla had realized, though she wasn't sure how, she would no longer be away from Barnaby anymore. For she knew, deep in her loins, that the void in which she, Shortner, and the salamanders resided was the same void which she had created in Barnaby's heart all those years ago. She may not have been the mother he needed, but she was proud of her son. Vagilla smiled as she put the finishing touches on Shortner.
Squaroosh! I'm done.
Shortner cried suddenly. Phelan, Valspar, Corfart, and Fartballs.
Tee-hee-hee, you sassy minx. I see where Barnaby gets it,
Phelan said lightly. Corfart took his head out of Phelan's ass for a minute, his face dripping with moisture.
Thanks, but I've had plenty of time to practice,
Corfart said as he looked over at Fartballs, who was sitting in the corner of the room. He was having Valspar play Brahms' Concerto No. 5 on his clarinet.
Well, it helps to have great partners,
Fartballs said, smiling. Valspar made to add something, but Fartballs pushed his head back down to finish the final movement. Immediately after their deaths, Phelan and Valspar had found themselves in the cabin with Corfart and Fartballs, in the land where milk flows like rain. It was more than what either of them could have imagined, for here Phelan could take any animal on a stick without consequence, and Valspar could have his chimney swept daily. Better yet, both of them had found that in this new realm they both came bubbles. How wonderful indeed.
I think we all inspire each other to greatness,
Valspar said, blowing out the last little bit of spit from the clarinet. He and Fartballs walked over to the bed and joined Phelan and Corfart. They all circled up for a good old-fashioned squirt on the cookie. Just friends being friends. It didn't take long before bubbles were floating up and out of the cabin's chimney in countless numbers. The four of them began singing.
blowing bubbles, forever blowing bubbles in the air, bubbles in the air,
Trinity. Trinity looked out at the orgy pile and couldn't help but feel pride. It had been 5 years since Mom and Dad had passed. Going down in a flaming whorehouse had always been their dream. Trinity was carrying on the traditions of her people, and through that, she felt she was able to keep her parents with her in some small way. As she watched the pile, Trinity's cat came up next to her and rubbed against her legs, meowing softly. Trinity had decided to name her Pussifer, after some of the stories her father had told her of a pussy he once had as a child. And in the end, she really had no choice. The cat had 3 buttholes of its own, just like Dad's Pussifer. At times, Trinity thought that perhaps this might be the reincarnation of Pussifer herself. The past was coming back to life, indeed. Reminiscing aside, some changes had to be made to the old ways. Trinity knew that. For instance, they couldn't do the orgy piles monthly. People were just too raw by the end of the year, and 14 hips had been broken in the first 2 months alone. Now one large yearly pile seemed to suffice in keeping the villagers' morale up. The village of Longville had also added some new traditions of their own that the Rishimi had never had. For example, each year one lucky child was selected to don the Shartner suit and light the orgy bonfire. After her death, Longville had preserved the skin of Shartner, turning it into a costume for children. The lucky child who was selected to wear the ceremonial suit would take the Weiner sword torch and light the bonfire, signaling the start of the yearly orgy. Trinity also made sure that the old ways of governing in the Rishimi culture were gone. Instead, she insisted that the villagers decide for themselves what was best for Longville. She continued to push for this even when the village was choosing a new leader, but there was no discussion to be had. They wanted Trinity. Nonetheless, she made sure things didn't fall back into a system of whoever is bigger makes the decisions. It took some time, but she bred out any penis or vagina that was too large. Everyone's size was now a standard 2.54 yaw. Anyone who exceeded that number had their members removed. Yes, all was at peace in Longville, and the sins of her family's past had been undone. Trinity walked over to the pile as she lubed up. She felt content and ready to bone.